In 1956, two of the world's oldest empires invaded a smaller country to reclaim a canalland. Within weeks, they were forced to retreat, not by armies, but by a financial threat from their own ally, Britain and France, victorious in 2 world wars. Owners of the most strategic waterway on Earth found themselves humiliated not on the battlefield, but in the balance sheets of London and Washington. The Suez Canal had been the artery of European empire for nearly a century, a man-made river connecting the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, Europe to Asia. Through it flowed the oil that powered British factories, the trade that sustained French commerce, the prestige that defined imperial identity. Then, in July 1956, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt's nationalist leader, stood before a crowd in Alexandria and announced that the canal belonged to Egypt now. Shareholders in London and Paris watched their assets vanish overnight. The canal, built with Egyptian labor and European capital, was no longer theirs. How did Britain and France, architects of the modern Middle East, suddenly lose control of it in a matter of days? To unswear that, we have to understand what the canal really meant to the European powers who built it. The Suez Canal opened in 1869, a French-engineered passage through Egyptian territory that cut thousands of miles from the voyage between Europe and Asia. Before Suez, ships bound for India had to circumnavigate Africa, a journey of months. After Suez, the Mediterranean became the highway of empire. Britain, recognizing its strategic importance, purchased the Egyptian shares in 1875 and effectively controlled the canal for the next 8 decades. By 1956, 2/3 of Europe's oil passed through Suez. British military bases dotted the canal zone. The waterway was woven into the fabric of imperial power. When Nasser nationalized it, he wasn't just seizing an asset, was severing an artery. For British Prime Minister Anthony Eden, the comparison was immediate and visceral. Nasser, he declared, was another Mussolini. Appeasement was not an option. France shared the outrage. Nasser had been supporting Algerian rebels fighting French colonial rule. Striking Egypt meant striking back at a broader threat. Together with Israel, which faced Egyptian blockade of its shipping, they devised a plan. Israel would invade Egypt across the Sinai Peninsula. Britain and France would issue an ultimatum for both sides to withdraw from the canal zone. When Egypt refused us, expected British and French forces would intervene, ostensibly to separate the combatants, actually to seize the canal. The military operation was a success. Israeli forces swept across Sinai. British paratroopers landed near Port Said. French troops secured key positions. By early November, the canal was effectively under Anglo-French control. On Tigrun, the operation had worked exactly as planned, but the real battle was not being fought in the desert. It was being fought in currency markets and diplomatic rooms thousands of miles away. The United States had not been informed of the plan. President Eisenhower was furious. The invasion, coming during his re-election campaign, made him look weak. More importantly, it handed the Soviet Union a propaganda victory. Moscow threatened intervention, even nuclear strikes, against the invaders. The United States faced a choice: back its oldest allies, or force them to withdraw and contain the crisis. It chose the latter end. The weapon it used was not military, but financial. The British pound was already fragile in 1956, burdened by post-war debt and struggling to maintain its role as a global reserve currency. Britain depended on American financial support and access to the International Monetary Fund to maintain confidence in the pound. The United States made its position clear. Unless Britain and France withdrew immediately, it would block that support. The Treasury signaled that it would dump its holdings of British currency, flooding the market and driving the pound into freefall. Without American backing, Britain could not borrow from the IMF. Its currency reserves would drain. The economy would spiral toward collapse. Prime Minister Eden received the message in stark terms: withdraw, or watch the British pound disintegrate. There was no fleet that could defend against that, no paratroopers who could secure the confidence of currency markets. Within days, Britain announced a ceasefire. Then, a withdrawal. Then, a humiliating retreat from the canal they had just captured. France followed, its government furious at what it saw as Anglo-American betrayal and its own diminished status. The canal remained in Egyptian hands. Nasser, defeated on paper, had won in reality. The Suez Crisis marked the symbolic end of British and French imperial dominance. Two empires that had ruled a quarter of the globe were now subordinate to American financial power. The United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the real global powers, their influence no longer measured in colonies, but in currencies, missiles, and alliances. Control of trade routes shifted from colonial ownership to national sovereignty, from private shareholders to post-colonial states. The canal that had been built to strengthen European empires became the event that exposed how powerless those empires had become. This is the historical irony that defines the crisis. The waterway designed to project power became the stage where power's true nature was revealed. The empires that built Suez could no longer afford to keep it. Not because they lacked ships or soldiers, but because they lacked the one thing that matters most in the modern world. Financial independence. The Suez Crisis proved that military victory means nothing without economic stability. You can win every battle and still lose the war if your currency collapses. This lesson has only grown more relevant in the decades since. Today, global conflicts are often decided by financial systems rather than military victories. Sanctions, currency pressure, and control of payment networks have become the weapons of choice. When the United States excludes a nation from the SWIFT banking system, it imposes a blockade more effectively than any navy. When it freezes foreign assets, it seizes territory without occupying an inch of land. When it threatens to cut off dollar access, it compels behavior change without firing a single shot. Russia, Iran, North Korea all have felt the pressure of a financial system that can be turned on or off like a spigot. Nations that once built empires through conquest now build them through control of credit, currencies, and the invisible architecture of global finance. The Suez Crisis was the moment this new reality became visible. The moment when a superpower proved that a balance sheet could be more powerful than a battle fleet. Britain and France learned this lesson in the sands of Egypt. Their retreat was not a military defeat, it was a financial one. They discovered that in the age of integrated economies and global currencies, no nation can fight a war that its creditors will not fund. This is the hidden architecture of modern power. It does not reside in battleships or barracks. It resides in the confidence of markets and the willingness of other nations to hold your currency. When that confidence evaporates, when creditors call in their debts, when the financial plumbing is turned off, empires crumble faster than any army can defend them. The Suez Canal still carries ships today, but the powers that control it are not the powers that built it. Egypt runs the waterway. The United States guarantees the stability of the region, and the empires that once ruled the waves now watch from the sidelines. Power in the modern world doesn't flow through armies alone, it flows through credit lines, currencies, and the systems that keep economies alive. The strongest weapon isn't a fleet. It isn't even a bomb. It's a balance sheet. And the nations that understand this, the ones that control the financial architecture, don't need to invade anyone. They only need to be willing to say no. If you want to understand how power really works, not the power you see in parades, but the power that moves silently through spreadsheets and bond markets, then hit subscribe. Because the wars of the future won't be won on battlefields. They'll be won in the places where money itself is created and destroyed.